In this comparative study, I will compare and contrast a 2003 Korean film, Memories of Murder, and a 2007 American film, Zodiac, to examine the use of narrative elements in introspective realist crime films. These films were chosen because of the parallels that can be drawn between their socio-historical and political context. Crime film is defined as a narrative that voices the conflict between personal initiative and social organization by following criminals, victims, and agents of the law. An enduring genre that burgeoned from film noir, the generic function of a crime film was seen as to invoke and reinforce a series of social bromides, showing that punishment comes with good intentions, and one cannot escape crime as the law is above individuals. This also took account of the audience's subconscious desire to maintain their sense of social decorum. However, since the early 2000s, a significant number of Hollywood and international films started to shift focus from expected action or suspense and onto the character's personal, emotional experience of crime. This generation of crime films intended to explore the social dimensions of their stories, their characters' complex subjectivity, and a detailed account of social context. This genre came to be known as the Introspective Realist Crime Films. Memories of Murder is a Korean film directed by BONG Joon-ho, based on the true story of Korea's first serial murders in history, where 10 women were raped and killed in a town called Hwasong from 1986 to 1991. This was also a traumatic period for Korea, which was back then under the rule of the military regime, where tens of thousands of people in the quest for democratization were tortured and killed. Zodiac is an American film directed by David Fincher and is also based on the actual serial murders in the U.S., which spanned from the 1960s to 70s, a period where the Vietnam War instilled cynicism and distrust in American citizens for their national institutions. Such is a sentiment that Zodiac carries as institutions failed to stop the murders, inducing an individual citizen to take action. Both films not only retell the serial murders of their respective countries, but also offers an introspection of their specific periods through the use of narrative devices. The first narrative device to be examined is characterization, an element which constructs characters largely through action, dialogue, and interactions with other characters. Unlike the conventional protagonist of crime films, both protagonists in Memories of Murder and Zodiac resemble ordinary people and possess ordinary capabilities, which accentuates the challenges they face in solving crime.
내가 싹 그렇게 못해서 어떡해, 형사가.
사람을 그렇게 못 알아봐서 어떡해, 형사가.
In Memories, BONG Joon-ho utilizes blocking to make characters look authentic. There are frequent shots with the Baroque ensemble, where while a serious dialogue and action takes place in the foreground, a less serious and jocular act happens in the background, thus layering the shot. This is accompanied by long takes and a slow zoom-in, creating the effect of the audience being in that space. While this allows the audience to concentrate on the dialogue between two characters, it also provides a comedic relief, leaving the audience unprepared for the upcoming violence that manifests in the later acts. Slapsticks are also used for comedy in the film, which often accentuates the lack of professionality among the characters, while the minimum cuts between shots create a sense of reality, humanizing the characters and making their actions look authentic. Like Memories, central characters of Zodiac who are involved in solving the crime are not ignored of their flawed qualities. Similar to Memories, such are expressed through blocking and layering of shots, where, for instance, in the first scene showing Gray Smith shows his relative lack of confidence and socialization with his colleagues, contrasted by another character in the background to whom attention is concentrated. However, unlike Memories, the flaw that the narrative emphasizes is not much of the traits the characters possess, such as the lack of social skills or arrogance, but rather the change in their moral attitudes. As time progresses, the central characters whose perspectives were shown in the first act of the film are eliminated one by one, leaving Gray Smith as a sole provider of perspective and action. In fact, the progression of time is a key element of the narrative setting and is expressed from the use of transitions. Fade to black between shots emphasize the passing of time and also a growing disconnection between the murders and the characters. The interior change in the San Francisco Chronicle and a time lapse of the construction of the Transamerica Pyramid emphasizes a change in environment, showing how the world moved on from the murders and continued to evolve, where only one character refused to leave it as a memory.
People get old, Robert. They forget.
It's 4 years ago, let it fucking go.
You're wrong.
Such contrast depicts a shift from the traditional values of community and disinterested sacrifice, which Gray Smith embodies, to a combination of sympathy and individualism, which were the symptoms of the decade. Meanwhile, in Memories, time is utilized in the form of a ticking clock, which is a typical narrative device used to motivate the characters to achieve their goals within a specific time frame. Memories express the passage of time through the changing tones of the shots and weather. From the information gathered in the film, it is known that the killer will strike again on the next train. Hence, the changing of weather creates a sense of urgency and a rise in tension as characters are rushed to find the killer. Simultaneously, like what is done in Zodiac, Memories emphasizes the effect of the passage of time on the environment. As rain pours and the clouds never lift, the color temperature of later scenes drop, an effect achieved in post-processing, creating a disparity from the first scenes of the town. A town which was once characterized by tranquil beauty and humble simplicity transforms into a place of despair and hopelessness, where the clouds are never lifted, removing the sense of warmth and tenderness the town once had, thus shows that the damage has been done. Another major element of setting that is seen in both films is the use of locations. In Zodiac, multiple locations are featured as a means of showing various perspectives involved in the case. This may be the victims, detectives, or the central protagonist. A multitude of perspectives is an aspect of introspective realism that the film pursues, where authenticity and accuracy of the event becomes a priority. However, the film begins to lose accuracy as Ray Smith's point of view manifests the last third of the film. As the audience comes to share his obsession and desperation for closure, and rather noticing his flaws such as being careless of his family's safety, the audience laments the authorities' impotence and attitude of indifference, which to a certain extent reflects how society viewed its authorities during the Vietnam War. The subjective narrative leads to an establishment of moral boundaries of right and wrong, an example of Hollywood narrative convention that Zodiac adopts. Meanwhile, location in Memories is utilized for more symbolic purposes. The film starts with an establishing shot of the golden rice paddies, which creates a mood of nostalgia and warmth. While rice paddies are reminders of humble upbringings in Korea, it functions as Korea's foundation, as rice is a staple food of the country. Thus, the corpses of victims which inhabit the paddies symbolize the corruption taking place in Korea's core. The police station, which is supposed to be the nation's voice of justice, is shown to be ridden by torture and corruption, where detectives clean the dirty mess of the military regime by suppressing student riots and torturing suspects to gain their confession. The violence of the police is candidly portrayed, and the only blood that is actually drawn on screen comes from the death of a mentally retarded suspect, which results during a chase with the police. The darkness of the military regime brought to Korea in the 80s also becomes a visual motif of the film. It is during the moments of the town blackouts when the victims are at their most vulnerable, enabling the murderer to target the weak, hence showing the regime's failure to protect those in need while inflicting pain to the weakest minorities of society, whether they are students or social outcasts. Hence, BONG treats Hwasong of the 1980s as a space of allegory, one that reveals all of the underdevelopment and the incompetence of state authorities, a place where people die inevitably. The differences and similarities of the narrative elements of the two films all boils down to the different functionality they possess, despite their pursuits of achieving introspective realism. Zodiac, like Memories, ends with an indefinite closure. However, it attains much more satisfaction than Memories, as Smith's book that chronicles his investigation becomes a source of indirect closure. Furthermore, the film's last scene provides an emotional catharsis for both the protagonist and the viewers, who now share his perspective. The shot-reverse shot between the two characters and the sequential shots of their reaction is an example of the Kuleshov effect, where the meaning that the audience creates is a confirmation of the suspect's identity as the Zodiac. Hence, the film creates a closure on its own terms, which again is an element of subjectivity in the film. But it is important to consider that such is an inherent aspect of Zodiac's origins in the Hollywood film industry, where films are eager to endorse the social bromides, as the industry's continued success depends on the health of the capitalist economy. Meanwhile, Memories of Murder persists its function as an allegory of Korean society in the 1980s. Through the film, we see that not only were women victims of violence, but an entire generation of that era who witnessed the corruption of the state, but were forced to carry on without resolution in the wave of Korea's rapid industrialization. All things considered, it's apparent that both films are products of their social context, an identity which is reflected from its impact on the use of narrative elements. In essence, both films utilize narrative elements to derive truth of the context in which the diegesis is set, so to keep the memories of a generation alive, as the dead can only exist through our memories.